Hey crypto traders, how's it going? So here we are, episode 2 of my weekly crypto market updates. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Before I get started and talk about the action we have in Bitcoin, I wanted to point out a couple resources on my YouTube channel that may be helpful. One, if you look back 2 videos, I put a video out called Using Elliott Wave. In this video, I go a little bit into the basic level of the Elliott Wave theory. You may find that helpful, may help you translate future updates from me and understand the language that I use. Further, you'll also, I talk about swing trading, and that one I actually draw, kind of sketch live, if you will, price action, how I take trades using the Elliott Wave theory. And it helps more if you're using my analysis as a member. But if you do take a free trial, for instance, you may want to find that video. It can help a lot. That's one. It's called Using Elliott Wave. It's two videos back. The other is this video, which is one back from last week's video, and that's called Our Crypto's Ready to Take Off. And this is a talk I did at the recent Trader Expos, and also I had a public webinar. And this talks about my outlook for 2019. I mean, basically, this was first taken in March, and basically, so far, of course, that's been playing out. But it talks a little bit more about some of the particular price action notions I'm looking for in the coming months. We were extended past a lot of the targets that I expressed, but hey, it's that's great. Catch that video if you have time. All right, so let's talk about Bitcoin real quick. I think last week, I was kind of talking through 2 sides of my mouth. One, I think we were overdue for a pullback, and I mentioned that. I mentioned how sentiment was getting very heated, and the pullback here would be very healthy. I also stated that our market has moved in a 3-wave pattern off the December lows, and as an Elliott Wave theorist, technician, so to speak, I want to see 5 waves off the December low to suggest a new bull market. Despite how strong it is, we still only have 3 waves. However, I think there's a potential chance that the 4th has started. And of course, I was looking at 10K, but the pattern that was going to move us up to 10K failed a couple nights ago. So while 10K will be in the cards later down the road, provided support holds, which right now is about 6,000. Right now we have a basic failure of price action to achieve that in the short term. So let's look at action real quick. I want to point out the same level of internal technicals that I've been looking at over the last few days and talk about where we're at. So if you guys remember, that was the RSI and how I treat that coming. So let's zoom in on the daily. The weekly really hasn't budged. Everything's super bullish there. Don't need to mention it. Now, if we look at daily action, I've got, I'll pull up Motive Wave and show this a little bit clearer, but we've got a 3-wave top, and basically this pattern off of last week's YouTube has basically failed. And so I don't see this. It could still stretch potentially, but I don't see it extending to the 10K in the short-term time frame. But right now I see we're more likely pulling back in our wave 4, and we topped back many days ago. If you look at the technicals, look at MACD, how it's starting to trend down on the daily. That will probably get us that run down in the 4 C wave, as we call it, down into the 4. And you can see RSI really hovering over this line, but potentially in the coming days break it. And that'll be some good confirmation, and that's about the 60 level. That would be some good confirmation that we're getting technically weaker in the coming days. And you can see my stochastic, and it's also rolling down. So technically very weak, technically suggesting, at least on a daily, that we could have more to go. Now I want to run to the 2-hourly. I actually switched from last week where I was talking about internals in a 1 hour. I've actually switched over 2 hours in the last week doing some studies that it's a bit more reliable. So bear with me as I get this. Let me get some of my notes off. If you look at it, you can see that RSI really started to come apart in right just before our drop. So it pushed up and then failed right at that key resistance line that I've marked on my chart. That historically is where things either turn or really push harder. That really was rejected that night with the single bar down, and that pretended the larger drop. You can also see how weak RSI was in that 2 hour. Now, where are we at today? You can see that RSI hasn't pushed through that level from which we dropped and is starting to roll over again. Although if we don't get a nice big red bars and get the contrary, a couple green bars here on the 2 hour, that may not roll over, but right now it's looking pretty weak. So all in all, I believe we should have another push down. If we look at motive wave real quick, I've got it laid out this way, and I call this WXY, which is one of our Elliott wave patterns. I have key support for this wave 4. I'd like to see 6,000 not break. Doesn't mean we get to 6,000, but I would like it to hold for this bull market to remain strong. And I would call this a failure to get a fifth wave if we're below 53.15. And Bitcoin has a tendency to have very shallow wave 4s. So if this is a good wave 4, I don't think we get there, but we'll see. And I also want to say wave 4s are tricky, and it may be that this pattern that I'm showing here doesn't play out, but it gets much more complex. That's really frequent with wave 4s. Also, I have wave 5 kind of a placeholder here up at 17,000. I think it could actually be a lot closer to 13,000. That's a key Fibonacci level on a larger time frame. But we can see anything in that range, but provided we hold that 14. Now we know from Bitcoin it often extends really far in its fifth wave. So, excuse me. So there's always a potential that's a lot bigger than my target. All right, so that's where we're at in Bitcoin. Just to recap, we failed to see the price action I needed to continue up into 10K. I had said and warned that we are in a deep need of a pullback, and I think we haven't seen all of that pullback that has started based on the current technical situation in Bitcoin. I think some of the weaknesses on some of the larger time frames, I probably should have took a little bit more seriously last week and just wasn't reading it as well as I should have, to be honest. But I think now, given the technicals are very weak, I'm not buying now. There's always an out for the market, and if we really push over 8,700, I then see us making probably another run. Excuse me, losing my voice. Another run at 10K potentially, but right now it is not my preference based on price action. All right, so I hope that that's helpful in the coming week. It's just time to buckle down for a little break to this bull market for the time being. All right, now I want to talk real quick about Ripple, and the reason I want to bring this chart up is I think beyond Bitcoin, I don't think I get any other request outside of my subscription service for any other chart. When I write an article, when I tweet, I think it's one of the most frequent requests. I think there must be a lot of Ripple bulls out there, and I don't know if it's because it's sort of a so called banker coin with it being used, with the Ripple X platform being used for our banking system. That doesn't mean the Ripple tokens used, it's just the platform that the Ripple team has created. That might be why, I don't know, but I get so many requests for it. And what I want to point out on this chart is this is a chart that I see probably sideways into the end of the year. I've said for another year, but I think it may at least have half the year to go. And if you look at Ripple's history, we had a triangle or the fall before the bull market ended, bear market started, and you can see this triangle. And if you look at this fractal, we have pretty much the same fractal happening in Ripple now. And we know from Elliott Wave that basically chart patterns, whether it be a stock or or a currency or whatever, has a tendency to follow similar patterns through history. It has affinity for certain patterns, and Ripple seems to have a triangle affinity. Bitcoin has a WXY pattern affinity, and we're seeing that pattern play out right now. Now, if we look at Ripple, it's been sideways. It's moving in three waves, up and down. That's part and parcel to a triangle, and right now may only be in the D wave of that triangle. Now, target-wise down the road, I have this level up in the $13 to $40 region. I have it sitting out here in 2020, but to be honest, I have no time frame preference on it. Long-term fractals can take a long time to play out. So we have that up there, and so at some point in time I'm going to be interested in being bullish, but not until I see a triangle filled out. And right now we need a good D and E wave, and if based on the distance between the B, C, and potentially the D here, we could take at least another 6 months, if not more, to fill out this D wave. Also, this triangle back here on some exchanges was 9 waves, not 5 waves, so it could go even farther. So right now in the short term, I see no reason to be a ripple bull because it's just going to be choppy sideways and frustrating. There's also potential that this is a B wave triangle, which is marked in red, and I see a drop back to 11 cents. That would suggest a completely different count, and that would also change my long-term target here, $13 and beyond. It probably would eventually get there, but not off of this C wave. So that's a potential alternate, but my preference right now is that it holds this E wave in this inclining trend line that we have off of the December low. So that's where I'm at with Ripple, and you know, I get a lot of requests from it, and I give a very pat answer that I see it sideways for a year, and I just want to demonstrate here why I see it that way. So I hope now that that's clear. The last chart I want to run through before we go is EOS, and I think everyone who's a big EOS fan is watching that news today, which apparently is what I had heard or seen a post on, was that they're going to come out with a Twitter competitor and share revenue with the participants in that platform. You know, part of the ad revenue, which is a really interesting concept. You know, I'm not nearly as excited about what the possibilities could have been, but it certainly sounds interesting. I assume it's going to be a very quality project, given that it's put out by the same folks that gave us EOS itself, which I think is a great coin to interact with. I know some people have issues with the lack of decentralization, but I think it's got a great interaction overall in terms of usability. Now, with the pattern that I've been tracking off of the December low, I think it's quite interesting that we have a potential culmination of news plus a top in this pattern, which it's not confirmed yet. I need to see a drop back down into the 6s to confirm, but this is the pattern that I've been tracking off the December lows, which is called the diagonal. You know, I have future, I've got double-digit expectations out of EOS, even triple digits eventually, but right now I'd like to see this top confirm, and I would like to see a three-wave pullback, which can go as low as $3, actually even the low 2s, but more comfortably would hold 360 and above, and this is what I'm tracking right now. So I think the news that we had today, while it isn't confirmed yet, is potentially a sell the news event. Even though it's a great project, we often see a lot of front running of news, and sometimes you get to a point where all the buying peters out before the news happens, and that might have been what has occurred today. And last night we have so far a top, but we need to see a lot more action. We can zoom in a little bit here, and we have the beginnings of a possible trend down, although we really need to break through this 4 at 686 at a minimum to suggest that a top is in, and I'd like to see us even pull back down to the 5s for this A wave, which is over here. Pull it back closer, which is over here in the middle of the screen. So that's what I'm looking at EOS, and I think it's a great lesson if you're trying to trade news. Often you may end up buying when those that front ran the news might be selling. Now, it's also compelling, we don't have technical divergence on this chart, which is very typical in the ending with diagonal, so it's also possible that we put in another couple waves here before we top, but I'd like to see I normally like to see a lot more divergence at the top of a diagonal. So we'll see what happens here. Right now, I'm holding my EOS because it's not, it's more of a long-term trade for me, but for now, I expect a top interim. So, all right, guys, that's all I have for today. Again, it's got some great resources on my channel. that may be helpful in terms of reading my language in the future. Again, in Bitcoin, bottom line is I think we have a correction to go, and Ripple, don't trade it. I won't trade it in the time being, and then cautious now on EOS as well. So that's where I'm at on this market. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you guys next week.